Zombie apocalypse.
How's it going, everybody? This is Tyler Drabo. Hope you're having another great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright, so I didn't really have anything that interesting to talk about today, so for today I'm just going to talk about another personal story of mine, and this was the time in which I went to a NASCAR race at Pocono in June of 2010. Now, obviously, for those of you that don't know, NASCAR is a sport that is completely different to other sports, because unlike in other sports where it's mainly just stick and ball sports, here you actually race cars, which runs in multiple racetracks throughout the country, and they usually do this about 36 times a year. So there are usually other series to go along with the NASCAR Cup Series in general. So I've been a fan of NASCAR since 2006, and one thing that I've always wanted to do was to actually go to a race. Well, in that year in 2010, my dad decided to get some tickets for me and along with my uncle Bassam and himself to go to a NASCAR Cup Series race at Pocono that year in June of 2010, which was the Gillette Fusion Pro Glide 500. And this would be the very first time that I would ever get to go to an actual NASCAR race in person. So obviously, as you could tell, I was pretty excited by that moment. You know, I had only just started becoming a real serious fan of the sport, and somebody that wanted to stick around the sport for a long time, I was very excited for that day. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience there at the track, what I went through, what happened during that day, and my hopes to get to go to another race like that in the near future. So that day, I got to go to Pocono Raceway, which was in Long Pond, Pennsylvania. During that time, at least during the start of it, we just got to walk around a little bit around the parking lot and even go to a few merchandise haulers as well. They were selling some merchandise as well, so we were able to get some stuff and memorabilia for one of my favorite drivers that were competing at the time, Jeff Gordon. I actually remember getting a hat there from the merchandise hauler there that they had. I don't remember where it is now because unfortunately I lost it a long time ago, but it was a very neat thing to have. And at the same time, there were also some other merchandise haulers that I also got to take photos of as well. I know there was one with Dale Earnhardt Jr., I know there was one with Jimmy Johnson as well, and a whole bunch of others as well that I got to be around, and that was very exciting as well. After an hour there, we got to go inside the racetrack just before the start of the race, where I got to get some real good seats there. Me, Bassam, and my dad, we actually managed to get some good seats, which were right next to the start-finish line, so we got to get a really good front row seat of the action. Well, not really front row seat, it was more like in the middle of the grandstands, but it was pretty close to the start-finish line, so we got to see where all the action was there. Unfortunately, weather was a real big issue during that day, so unfortunately, just before the race was about to begin, it did start to rain, and so unfortunately, the cars had to be tampered, and we actually had to end up seeking shelter until the rain stopped, and this actually was around like 3 hours as well. And unfortunately, I didn't know if we were going to get the race going because it was on a Sunday that we had to watch the race at, and if this race got postponed, I had to miss it and go to school the very next day, and I really didn't want that to happen. But fortunately, Mother Nature cleared up, and fortunately, the rain went away just in time, so we were able to get at the very least a 3 p.m. start to the race. So that was a very good thing to see because, like I said, if the rain had postponed the race to the next day, I wouldn't be able to get the chance to see it, and I would have been very upset if that would have been the case. So the race actually started out pretty smoothly. There wasn't a whole lot of action that was going around at the time. Really, the fans though around us, they were very neat to be around. Although I didn't get a chance to talk to any of them, there was a lot of diehard things about these fans. They were very passionate about the sport. A lot of them have memorabilia on with their favorite drivers. They even cheered on a lot of drivers as well, even those that were not some of their favorites. And of course, they booed a few as well. And of course, the real thing is they were just passionate about the sport. Unlike in other sports, the fans that we were sitting with, they really didn't care about whether or not their driver won or lost, unless they got wrecked, obviously. But all they cared about was that they got to be with each other, hugging their American flags out in the infield, and we would just have a good time. So, the start of the race, we would just got to have a lot of fun with the fans, and, that was definitely a very neat thing to deal with. Then there was actually a competition caution, obviously, because of all the rain that took place, and after that, though, it really got a little bit boring for a little while because there was a very long stretch of green flag racing, I believe it was around like the longest stretch was probably around like 75 or 80 laps. I don't remember, but you know, it was a very long stretch, and usually at that track it is known for very long green flag runs as well. But after that, we started to get some real action. You know, obviously there was a lot of action in the pits, and it was actually very loud as well, because you know, we actually heard a lot of engine sounds from pit road, you know, when they were changing the tires and all of that. And you know, it was one of those times that a lot of us wish that we had earplugs on, because it was very loud, even from very that high up in the grandstands as well. And then after that, we started to see a lot of action late. You know, we saw a lot of crashes as well. There was a lot of cautions that were coming out, and you know, during late in the race, you know, things were starting to get really interesting at the time. And so, you know, the first half of the race, you know, it was a little bit clean. You know, there was really not much happening at the time, but the second half, things were starting to get pick up. And then late in the race, that's when things got really interesting. Just as they were about to take the white flag, there was this incident between two drivers, Kevin Harvick and Joey Logano. Those drivers ended up getting into each other in turn 3, coming to take the white flag. Logano was unable to save the car, and unfortunately, he ended up spinning out, and that caused a caution, which ended up setting up a green-white checkered. And this incident would be very famous, not just in my mind because I saw this in person, but also in NASCAR lore. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a little bit. So obviously, it ends up going in a green-white checkered. Denny Hamlin is leading the race, and so he obviously has to hold off his teammate Kyle Busch and a whole bunch of other drivers to try to win the race. And it was a very interesting final 2 laps. You know, everybody was going after each other. All the fans, we were all standing up, you know, because we really wanted to see what was about to happen. And on the final lap of the race, there was this huge accident that ended up taking place, including drivers Casey Kane. He actually ended up going airborne. He almost went out of the track actually, because he got hit by a whole bunch of other drivers. And I tell you, it would have been a very scary sight if he ended up going into the trees. But you know, he was okay, but it still started off a huge accident, which collected a whole bunch of other cars there. Unfortunately, my favorite driver, Jeff Gordon, was involved in an accident. He wasn't doing all that well during the time, and unfortunately, he ended up getting caught in that accident on the last lap. So he ended up suffering a pretty disappointing finish. But you know, everybody was okay. You know, we were pretty relieved about that. And I should probably tell you, Pocono has a big history of pretty violent accidents in the past, and you know, that still stands to this day. And you know, it's fortunate that it wasn't any worse than that. So the race unfortunately ended under caution, and it would be Denny Hamlin that would end up winning the race. Obviously, Denny Hamlin was obviously the dominant driver of that day, and so he would go on to win the race. But it was after the race, while we were walking out, obviously, that you know, things got really interesting, because right in front of us on pit road, there was this huge fight that took place. Obviously, I mentioned to you guys the Logano Harvick incident that happened near the end of the race in turn 3. Well, after the race, Joey Logano would actually end up confronting Harvick's crew because he was pretty upset over what happened that day. He really wanted to talk to Kevin because he wanted to let him know how he felt, and he and the crew actually ended up getting into it with each other. And I managed to see all of it right in front of me just as I was walking out with my dad and uncle. It was pretty much one of the craziest things that I ever saw. And obviously, you know, there tends to be a lot of fights that happen on pit road after a race whenever something like this happens, but the fact that I get to saw one in person, and one that really changed the career of Joey Logano, that was pretty interesting to say the least. Because you know, Logano, he was known for being really quiet, calm, and really happy-go-lucky guy, but I think that was the moment where everything in his career changed. That was when he started later on to become more aggressive. He started winning a lot more, and obviously he is now the 2018 NASCAR Cup Series champion. But that really was a very big moment in NASCAR history for Joey Logano, and really something that really just caught my eye at the very end. And I just couldn't believe that I actually saw not only a huge wreck, but also a fight in person at the end of that race as well. But yeah, overall, it was a very fun experience. And you know, if we're having to wait 3 hours and not even knowing if I was even be able to see the race that day, it was really worth the wait. You know, as somebody that really was just starting to get into the sport, you know, has been around for at least the last 5 years, to get the opportunity to go to that race in person with my dad, along with my uncle, who I've, by the way, been to multiple other sporting events with as well. We've been to a couple of basketball games when the Nets were still the New Jersey Nets, of course, they're now the Brooklyn Nets, and even a couple years ago when I went to the New York Red Bulls game along with the New York Jets game in 2019 as well. But those were fun experiences. But that was an experience that I really couldn't forget, because that was a day where me, Dad, dad and my uncle really got the full taste of what it was like to be a NASCAR fan. And with racing season starting to pick up, obviously the coronavirus vaccine is allowing stadiums to open up to full capacity again, and a lot of racetracks, well, pretty much every racetrack in the country is now opening up to full capacity again. It's just very exciting because I want to be a part of the sport a lot longer. Hey, maybe even work at a NASCAR team as well, or maybe work at a NASCAR facility. Go to a lot of NASCAR tracks and get to watch some of the races. I want to continue to be a part of the sport for a very long time. And so hopefully the opportunity comes for me to get to go to another race again. I definitely have a few events that I would really like to go to that I have on my bucket list. The Daytona 500 is obviously one of them. The Brickyard 400, well, it's not a Brickyard 400 anymore. They now converted to a road course starting this year. I also want to go to a Coke 600, the Southern 500, maybe a race or two, Talladega. I also want to go to Dover, Watkins Glen, and I also want to see the Indianapolis 500, the IndyCar race as well, which happened a couple weeks ago as well. There are a lot of races that are huge that I really would like to go to in person. But yeah, that was really my first and only true experience of what it was like to be at a NASCAR race in person. It was an experience that was very fun. I really didn't want to forget that, and yeah, I just felt like that I wanted to share it with you because it's just something that we all love our sports. We all love our different sports, and NASCAR is a sport that not many people my age these days know a lot about or even watch, but it's still very fun to watch and fun to be a fan of. NASCAR is definitely a great community, and definitely it was a very fun weekend there, and definitely hope that in the near future I get to go to some more races in the future because I love the sport, I love NASCAR, and I want to continue being a part of the sport, whether or not as a fan or maybe in the future as an employee of the sport for a very long time. Alright, so that's it for this video. Obviously a little bit shorter than usual. However, I am going to be talking a little bit more about what I'm planning next when it comes to my content. That's going to be in my third life update video. I'm actually going to be doing that next weekend, so stay tuned for next weekend. I'm going to be talking to you about all the new content that I have planned for the next few weeks up there, and I got a lot planned for the rest of this summer, so stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss it. Otherwise, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button, and if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when my latest video is released. As always, be sure to comment below for future suggestions for any of my videos, whether it's vlogs, projects, or challenges, you name it. Be sure to leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. And as always, follow me on my social media. All the links are in the description below. That's it for this video. Hope you guys are having another great day. And as always, I hope to get to see all of you again in another video very soon. So long, everybody.